www.workingParent.info. Thanks for joining us, thanks for watching for this parenting interview. I'm joined with fellow dad and VFX artist Adam Sibbick. Thanks, Adam, for joining us.
You're welcome.
So before we start talking about jobs and contracting, I just want to put this out there first of all. You've got 4 kids.
4, yeah.
So I've got 2 kids. I find it so difficult just managing with 2 kids. Perhaps you can tell us how you cope, how do you manage to balance your time just between 4 children?
Well, I think having one child first kind of makes such a huge kind of impact on your life that after that, any subsequent children just kind of add more time. As you say, it's more, everything's takes a bit longer.
Sure.
So that means bath times, bed times, things like that just take longer. I wouldn't say it's any more difficult, it's just...
Did you find that the gap between 1 and 2 was harder to bridge than between child 3 and child 4? Or?
Well, the gap that I've got between 1 and 2 is only 10 months. So It's almost like, the first one wasn't crawling, so in a way that was quite easy. I could pop him down and get on with things and know he's going to still be there. So that one, but the gap between the second and the third was a bit longer. That was a couple of years. So yeah, then it became a bit more sort of stressful, I guess.
Sure.
Yeah.
And in terms of balancing your time between them, do you find you tend to give more time to one child over the other, or do you make a deliberate, conscious effort to make sure you're spreading yourself equally between all of them?
I guess I found it's it varies depending on, obviously when we had like the most recent one, the 4th one, he was a baby, needed a lot of time, so that sort of coincided with my eldest going to school.
Okay.
So those 2 needed the most time, and the little sort of in between ones didn't quite need our attention. Whereas as now that the other one's getting older, he's crawling around, the youngest one, then he needs a bit more attention. So I think it sort of balanced itself out over a longer period of time, I guess, rather than sort of a per day, say, basis.
Right. Okay. Yeah. There's times when one needs more, and one can look after himself a bit better.
Exactly.
Let's talk about work. Lots of parents, they work and they struggle to balance their time between work and children. First of all, before I ask you about how you balance it between 4, how are you balancing your time between working and at home with your children?
Well, I guess at the moment it's a case of me trying to leave it as late as I can to get to work, and then sort of leaving on time all the time, just because I know that we need that time at home. I think for the boys and for my wife as well, just to let her to kind of get on with it. It's not so easy now for me to just say, I'm going to be home late tonight or anything like that.
Yeah.
Whereas before I could drop it and say, I'll be home in a couple of hours. But that means instead of me just being home late and maybe not seeing that TV programme, now it means she's got to get them all bathed, ready for bed, read the stories, and so it's a lot more pressure on her.
How do you find you're progressing at work now? Since before you didn't have any children, you could stay late, you could work weekends. Now you do have children, you've got to be there. Do you find that's kind of impacted upon the amount you can give to work?
It has, certainly, yeah, definitely, it has. But it just means I have to plan a little bit more ahead, I think. So in the case that I might have to think, I'm going to have to work late next week, we've got a demo or something like that coming up we have to do, I'd have to sort of say to my wife maybe that week, I'm going to be late on this night or on that night, so she's kind of know it's coming. Whereas before I'd have thought, I want to get this finished tonight and sort of stay late. So I don't know, that's certainly affected that side of things.
Okay, and talk a bit about contracting, because a lot of people out there have gone from being a full-time employee, a staff position, to being a contractor. I did it myself a few years ago, and I found it quite a different. You're still doing a job, essentially. You're coming and you're doing a job, but there's a whole host of benefits and perks that are being taken away from you. You've made that transition quite recently. First of all, just tell us how are you adjusting to that different mindset?
It is a different mindset, certainly. I'm not finding it too bad. I think on a day-by-day basis, it's not much different. Whereas I think there's always at that back of your mind, there's this date that you've got that's going to be the end of your contract or something like that. Yeah. Whereas it's kind of full-time, that's a worry you don't have. It's kind of, well, you do have it in the sense that everyone worries and thinks, is my job secure? But you don't have that definite I'm only here for another month or something like that. So
Yeah.
that certainly kind of puts an extra bit of pressure at the back of your mind.
Yeah, particularly in our industry of contracts, they can be anything from even a few. I saw one contract that was for a few hours.
That's crazy. I know.
So it's mental. What do you think the main advantages are of if someone has a choice, and not everyone does have a choice? What do you think the main advantages are of being a contractor versus a full-time employee, or even what the disadvantages are?
I guess the obvious one that most people probably would say, I guess, is money. You tend to get paid better as a contractor. Companies are willing to kind of almost make up for that sort of lack of job security by offering you a bit more.
Yeah, in short term.
In the short term,
for them, yeah.
Exactly. So you kind of, I guess, have to bear that in mind when you think I'll be out of work in a month. When you're kind of negotiating contracts and things like that. But there seems to be a few disadvantages as well, I guess, and that is the biggest one: job security and that sort of feeling of, I've got all these kind of mouths to feed. And,
right. Well, that was something I wanted to ask you. Was some people have one child, it's very stressful to think I don't have a job and I've got a child. But you've got 4 children. Do you feel that it's the same amount of pressure, or do you think it's more, quadruple, or is there some kind of correlation between?
I think if you've got any child, that's the bulk of the pressure straight away.
Yeah.
I think if you've got more, it does cost me more at the moment, and I think quite a bit would depend on the age of your children as well. Because at the moment, I'm finding, we go through a loaf of bread a day, a couple of litres of milk and things like that. But
washing machine, 2
the washing machine's on like 3 times a day, and the dishwasher and everything like that, and that adds up. But I can imagine when they're kind of sort of 12, 13, getting on for sort of mid-teens, you're going to go through a lot of food, a lot of clothes and things like that you provide for. So I can imagine it's sort of getting harder as they get older.
Sure.
Yeah.
Let's talk about in-between contracts. When you're in between contracts, certainly the amount of pressure I felt was just immense having 2 kids. I found it so difficult to make phone calls, send emails, follow up on calls, especially when you follow up and no one answers, and at the same time you've got children in the house, perhaps in your room. It's very difficult to not neglect them, give them time, but they don't really understand. Perhaps you can tell us what it's like, that phase in between contracts, and obviously with the emphasis on 4 kids all demanding time from you. Where do you find time to actually apply for jobs?
Well, it's crazy. It really is crazy, because in between when I was permanent and became contractor, I actually worked from home as well, which involved kind of doing some employment at home, and that was a similar thing really, where you've got the children running around and you're trying to focus and get on with things. So we actually my computer at home is set up in our dining room, but it's got free access to the children, so there's no
you're not
door.
in a separate...
No, but what I did was put up a curtain across and sort of taught the older ones that was, when that was closed, Daddy was working, so they appreciated that. The 2-year-old, he used to pop in, his little head would pop in around the corner quite often, so that was a bit more awkward because he was younger, he didn't understand. He'd think, Daddy's going to come and play.
Yeah.
The older ones respected it to a degree, I think.
Sure.
But you could still hear it, and I used to feel, I think one of the hardest things was I'd feel kind of a bit guilty leaving my wife to sort of sort them out, and thinking, I should really go and give her a hand, but knowing that I've got to get on with work or looking for work. And
were you able to focus with all of that noise?
It was difficult. It was difficult. I used to try and do as much as I could after they'd gone to bed, which sort of eats into your own time, what you would have used to spend with your wife or your partner.
And of course, there's no recruitment managers at their desks.
No, exactly. No, that's it.
They're at their desks at all.
So you do all your preparation sort of at night.
Yeah.
And so that's all your own time you've got is gone. And then anything you can do during the day, you try and do during the day, all the phone calls and things like that. Yeah.
So let's very briefly talk about travelling away for work. Being a contractor, you've got to take a job as and where it comes. Have you kind of thought about if you had to travel off to other countries or different continents, how would your wife... I had to travel, to give you an example, last year I was out in Canada. My wife and 2 kids were here in England.
Right. Oh.
It was really hard for her with 2 kids. Is that kind of things you're thinking... You've got to always keep that in mind as well when you're looking for work. You can't say no to a job, but can you leave your wife with 4 kids?
It's difficult, I suppose, and I guess that would be on the length of the contract and things like that, because you'd think, is there that sweet spot where I I'm away for a short amount of time, but you know, I need the work, or is it long enough to kind of think about moving or something like that, or organising a trip for them? I don't know, you know. And when you haven't got the money, you can't do things like that.
You can't choose, yeah.
It's very awkward, I think, in that situation. Unfortunately, I haven't been in that situation yet, but I can appreciate that must be a difficult one.
Sure. Okay. Well, if there's any advice that you could give to parents out there, there's a lot of parents out there who are looking for work, who are struggling in terms of, not so much in terms of job hunting, but in terms of keeping your sanity and holding it together for the sake of your kids. Is there anything in particular that you could offer up to our viewers?
I think I'd probably, on the most part, just try and keep some sort of consistency, because the whole thing with contract is that it isn't consistent, is it? It's kind of 1 month you might be in work, 1 month you won't, but if you can try and keep that still at certain times of the day I do this, and if you're at home, then maybe kind of I set aside an hour in the afternoon to kind of spend some time with them and think, oh, I'll work an hour later to try and sort of chase some stuff up later and things like that. So yeah, try and keep some sort of normality, I guess.
Excellent.
Yeah, that's why. And also another thing is to kind of, I suppose, try and do stuff when you have got the time, because suddenly you might find yourself with an hour, and don't think, oh, I might do that sort of tomorrow or the next day, because as we know, kids, they can change plans in a second. So do it when you can, rather than don't plan ahead. Well, do plan ahead, but don't
miss the
do it when you can.
opportunity.
Do it when you can. Yeah.
Excellent, that's great. Thanks so much for joining us. I think everyone found that really useful. Thank you so much for watching. If you have any questions or comments, please put them in a post below. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel. Most of all, go visit www.workingParent.info and share all the media, share through all the social networks that you have. Thank you, Adam, again, and thanks all for watching. Okay, we'll see you next time. Thank you.